came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I'm under until it is completed. Do you think that I have come to bring peace to earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 2 against 3, and 3 against 2. The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. A little bit different today, right? It's a little bit changed. Some might say reformed. And we started with that. Thank you for the way that you shared that gospel with us. When we understand it and we put a little oomph into it, we put a little bit of energy, it really comes alive and you can see yourself in that story. And if you, depending on the Bible that you've got in front of you at home, when you have a look at that, it's all in red letters. And it's great that it's in red letters because it's a pretty spicy reading. Jesus has just had this long period of quite literally walking with people. And chapter after chapter and verse after verse, Jesus is walking and trying to do great things. Healing the sick, feeding the hungry, gathering the lost. And the entire time, they're the lawyers, they're the Pharisees, they're even his own disciples. Hey, but it says this. Hey, but it says that. No, but you're doing this and it says that. And they're poking and they're poking and they're poking. And then we get, I came to bring fire. And you go, ooh, this is maybe a bit of a low blood sugar moment. Somebody maybe needs an apple. Somebody is not their best self right now. This does not mean that we get to point to a Bible verse and say, I'm allowed to snap at people just in case I haven't taken care of my own hunger. It's not how it works. We can't blame Jesus for that. But it is really beautiful that it becomes accessible. You go, oh, I've found myself in that place. I try to be a good person. I try to be kind. I try to answer people and say, that was a great question. However, I think you know the answer. We all try to do that. But then you find yourself at the end of the day going, please, Lord, help my child to figure things out for themselves. And that's where he's at. He's exhausted. And he's tired of saying it with all of these parables and layered allegories. And I am that person that is hugely relieved that that's the case. Because these layered allegories and all of these great uses of words, they just don't make it through here. I am that disciple that he would have said, please just be quiet for 24 hours. Give me a break. And I'd be going, but it says this, but it says that. Why are we doing it this way? It said that. And he would be frustrated with me. And I would be divided out from the group until I could understand. And so there's this conversation of division, but instead of it being a quick snap, figure it out yourself. It's not. It's I came to bring fire. I came to divide. And that chapter goes on. So there will be a house of 5, and it will be 3 against 2, and 4 against 1, and mother against son, and son against mother, and father against, and it goes through every type of relationship breakdown that there could be. And then we stand here and go, oh, that's even harder to hear and to understand. We have those moments that we've been speaking about as a confirmation class where we go, does that sound like God? And I always think that with things that we read in the gospel and you go, that really doesn't sound like Jesus to me. This kind of doesn't. But then we think about division. What is division? What would division have looked like? And fire and division, well, if you're at all kind of up on your medieval farming practices, I know it's something that I study in my spare time, the wheat and the chaff is burned. When you pull the husk of corn and you're left with the stalk, if you don't have cattle to throw it off to, it's something that sits there, dries, bundled, and burns later. It's part of that process. When we think about other fires and fire references within the Bible, the Holy Spirit comes with a tongue of fire that divides. And when it divides, it meets all of the individuals in the room and gives them the ability to speak to one another. So that's the division. It's division that allows for a group to be reformed. It allows for a reformation. This is Reformation Sunday. And it's not about division as a bad word. It's about division as a beautiful word. And I want to give you an example of some of my favorite type of division. And I think that we all agreed as a group. If you take a kernel, we're going to pretend there's one in my hand. It was in the pockets of my other trousers. I slept on a floor last night. I apologize, I forgot it. Let's pretend it's here. This single kernel of corn. Since storytelling began, it began around campfires. And we realized, especially when we look at the stories of the First Nations people and Indigenous people of North America, they knew to put that corn on the fire and something magical was going to happen. So you take that one kernel, and that kernel goes into the fire. And then inside of it, something is stirred, something is happening, and its husk, that hard outside that protects it from the world, cracks. It divides, it opens, and it becomes this beautiful and delicious thing that it was meant to be through division. Its husk is divided. It is then divided from it like the wheat from the chaff. The old is gone, the new can happen. Division. When we think about Martin Luther and the other reformers, this is what they were doing too. They were looking at a system just like Jesus was in this reading. They were looking at a system of do, don't do. Say, don't say. They took a system that was do and don't, and they wanted to bring it into a system of be. We have the temple. You go and you pay your money, you do your things, forgiveness is yours, walk away. That's how you do God. And Jesus is saying, I came to bring fire. Let's burn that down. And then you can be somebody who is forgiven. You can be somebody who is with God. From learning and memorizing to being and experiencing. That is what Jesus is saying in here. And then when we think of Martin Luther and the Reformation, it was exactly that. This beautiful thing that was supposed to be that example that Jesus set. Well, let's be honest. I often tell the story of the stick. You know, a boy finds a stick, it's just a stick. Within a few minutes, it's a walking stick. A few minutes after that, it's an inspection stick. Seconds later, it's a weapon, right? We can take anything and turn it into a weapon. We found ourselves in a church that had returned to do. You have to show up on Sunday or you're going to not a nice place. You have to make sure that you say and do exactly this so that you can get forgiveness. It went back to doing, and it wasn't being. Where was our relationship? It was Martin Luther and the other reformers who said, that doesn't sound like Jesus to me. And there's nothing wrong with division. I said I would be that disciple who was divided out. Because I ask a lot of questions. I learn differently. If they were like, here's a pamphlet that explains salvation, I'd go, can somebody read it to me and or act it out? That would help my learning style. It wasn't an option then, so I would be divided out. Those of us that are divided out, we get to see the big picture. I need to see the whole picture. Show it to me. Then let me see myself in it. Division's not a bad thing. Division is what sparked this fire. This is the fire that we gather around. It's the fire that was started by Martin Luther and the other reformers. It's where we now find ourselves safe and cozy around it. But it's also the fire that helps us to participate in becoming exactly who we were supposed to be. It's a fire that stirs something within. It helps us to slough off, divide from the old, and become exactly who we're called to be. And if you look around and you go, That sounds really lovely, but it doesn't feel like that. The other person in the Bible who gathered safely around a fire, he found so much safety around his fire that he was able to deny Jesus 3 times. And he knew it. He had been standing there. I will never deny you. I love you very much. We have a relationship. 2 hours later, he's found safety in a fire that is in the courtyard of a place of do and don't. And that security feels good. And he feels so safe that he can say, Jesus, never knew the guy. No idea. And he can do it 3 times. That's what we need to remember when we gather around the fire to tell our stories. Do we gather around a fire that is turning us into the beautiful thing that we're supposed to be, from an individual kernel to popcorn together? Or do we find ourselves gathering around a fire that gives us so much security and comfort that we deny and we don't transform? Always the important question to ask. Because this happened, transformation happened, we have popcorn. But then afterwards, there were other steps. You guys decided what you were going to add. There was more to it. Reformation is not something that we celebrate because it happened. Reformation is something we celebrate because it's happening, and we are a part of it. And our youth, we gathered this weekend and we asked, does this sound like God? Does it sound like you? Do these words make sense? If they don't, change them. We sometimes need to reform things and reform the picture because it needs to be reformed when we've been invited in. So let's be invitational. Let's participate in this ongoing reformation. And let's use these Sundays every year as a really great reminder that we want to be a part of this process when it comes to ourselves and one another. We can't let the process end. Let's be divided from the old and invitational with the new.